Good morning, everyone. I'm so grateful that you're here this morning. Let's find a seat and grab our last minute coffee and join me at the front here for our Lumina talk this morning. We're doing something a little bit different. And how it is different is we're going to do an interview format on mental health today. Since it is Mental Health Month, all month we've been talking about this subject. And so I just want to introduce first Peyton Schaefer to you this morning. Peyton is I'll say an emerging counselor. She has just finished a clinical degree in counseling and she is moving into the counseling field. I actually changed my mind about this talk because initially I was going to interview a retiring counselor. And then I sat in a meeting with someone and said, where are the young people? Where are the emerging people in these fields? And we need to start talking to them about what they're seeing, also with wisdom, seeking out some of the older counselors as well. But looking at younger people emerging into these fields and asking them serious questions about it and finding out what is coming on the horizon. So that's what today is about, is just having a open dialogue, open discussion, non-judgmental. We're not diagnosing anybody here. You might diagnose me, but we're not diagnosing anybody in the room about this subject. So a couple of just housekeeping. We are online. We're doing this live. And so those of you who want to ask a question, you can. We'll have to repeat that question in the microphone. So it's a little bit awkward in the live setting. Those of you who are online listening today, we are in front of a live audience and it is an audio recording. So if you want this audio recording, you can download it from our YouTube channel, and you can have access to it. So a couple more things is next week we are online only because we have flip-flopped. And so the next conversation with Bethany Flug is at the end of the month. She is going to walk through part 2 of the community resilience model with me. And so the community resilience model was offered to us last year in part 1, part 2, with a lot of recap of part 1 if you missed it. So you're not going to miss anything. But if you want to go back to that video series on the community resilience model, you can get on the YouTube channel and look that up. So not next week. Next week is online only. And then the following week is the community resilience model with Bethany Stoller and myself. All right, so today we are talking about mental health because over the last handful of weeks, if you've been online listening to news and your news channel, you've seen reports coming out that mental health is in a crisis, that we have mental health off the charts when it comes to depression, anxiety diagnoses, and psychosis diagnoses. And honestly, we live in a world that's isolated. We feel more isolated. We feel more anxious. We have increased anxiety, overwhelming exhaustion, just being overwhelmed in general. We are experiencing all kinds of pressures and unknown things when it comes to these little fun things in front of us and what those are doing to our minds and social media and image dysphoria and body dysphoria and all the things that come with social media and images and things. There's some emerging stuff that we really need to be serious about and talk about from a Christian perspective, non-Christian perspective, societal perspective, relational perspective, all the perspectives. We need to have a handle on it. We talk about politics, we talk about economics, productivity, achievement, success. All of that has caused a different kind of pressure that over the last 10 years I've never seen before in my life. Maybe you haven't either. Relationships, trauma, loneliness, shame, grief, meaning, belonging. We did a series by Brene Brown, and that was the Atlas of the Heart series. And Brene Brown talked a lot about these subjects and emotions and how she is seeing them as well, and relationship and meaning and grief and loneliness. We don't talk about those things enough. So today we're going to talk about what's happening to us emotionally. I want to be open with you about it. I want to be in a safe place with you about it. So if you need to take a break, take a break. If you need to go get some air, get some air. This is not about you feeling trapped in this discussion. And I want you to feel like you can get up and walk around and stand up and go into the kitchen and get out of the conversation if you need to. Because some people in the room are struggling, and some of you aren't struggling. You're just here and you want to learn more. You might just treat this as a learning time. But people are struggling. And what's the conclusion of this discussion, what I really want it to turn into is a healing discussion. Where are we finding healing? And Peyton is going to show us some techniques and also just some integrated, what she is calling integrated family systems, how that's weaved through mental health and what we can do. So welcome. Let's welcome Peyton today.
Hi.
So we're going to do this in 3 blocks, like I explained in our pre-work. So
Yeah.
3 blocks. We're going to do 15 minutes, and then table talks. Questions will be up on the screen, and on video, on audio, they'll also be up on the screen for those that are online this morning. So let's just talk about the state of emotional health, because you get these reports. And so just openly for just a minute or two, just talk about what you're seeing on the mental health landscape. Like, what are you actually visiting with your emerging clientele and your mentorship with, the person that's mentoring you? What are you seeing?
I'm seeing a lot of this, definitely the increase in awareness of mental health. And I think a lot of the times we think that it's maybe substantially worse than it has been in the past, but I think that that comes from building awareness about it, because
Okay.
before it's a relatively new field just in general. So I think that we see it, and there's stressors are consistent through all the different years. They're not the same stressors, but they are consistent. So, we don't have the same things that we're going through now that we did in the 1940s during wartime and stuff like that. But it is still stressors that are different. I'm seeing a lot of the awareness of it. And then also with that comes a lot of struggles for folks, because awareness of it is hard, because it means you have to kind of come to terms with the fact that things are not great.
So you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Once you, yeah, I'm physically unhealthy.
Yeah.
I'm let's say I have 20 pounds on my body that I want to lose, and now I have to figure out how to lose it. So
Yeah.
mental health, I find out that I'm actually dealing with anxiety. So now I need to do something about it.
Right.
What are some anxiety stressors that you see, like in modern culture?
I would say that, there's a lot of things. Definitely a lot of it's social media. A lot of it is also the stressors that come from the diagnosis. I have a couple clients that, and as a clinician, we have to diagnose people. We can't bill insurance without that, which I don't love, but that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so because of that, a lot of people get this association of, oh, this is my disorder, and then now I need to fix it right away. And I think that can be a lot of pressure for people, because disorders come about from a lot of different things: a lifetime of trauma, a different chemical makeup in your brain, different things like that. And so I think a lot of times people are like, okay, if I know what's wrong, I need to fix it. Then they can very quickly shame themselves when it doesn't happen inevitably right away.
So I've seen, and Eddie Carrillo at the high school, he's a great mental health counselor. He's actually a mental health professional, clinical psychologist at the high school, and he's the only clinical psychologist. And I mean, honestly, in the high schools around, we're very fortunate in Sherwood to have a clinical psychologist on staff.
That's rare.
That's like rare.
Very
right?
rare. Yeah.
So he's working with a lot of kids teens
Yeah.
in high school that honestly, I mean, I'm not sure where it's coming from. I'm thinking about my high school career, and I was like, did I experience these things?
Yeah.
Kids, are we just becoming more aware? It just seems like young people are dealing with more. Do you believe that that's because of access? Like, we have access
Yeah.
to things.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
they're having conversations I never had.
Yeah, we as human beings, like we didn't like we existed before phones, before news, before technology, and the amount of access we have to what's going on in the rest of the world is way too much. Way too much. We weren't supposed to be seeing all these things firsthand. Hearing about them is good, knowing what's going on in the rest of the world is good, but the amount of news and like just media that we have come up on our phones on a daily basis is information overload for sure.
So let's identify some things, the language of mental health. So
Yeah.
we have like anxiety and depression. We have then greater things like the things that we hear about, like borderline personality, bipolar, schizophrenia. Those are kind of like those, whoa, what are those scary things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
When it's actually not that scary.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So help us identify anxiety. I have anxiety. I'm nervous about speaking here this morning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or I'm nervous about having this conversation with an unknown person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when does that anxiety turn into anxiety disorder?
That's a good question. Anxiety disorders, I feel, are more rare than they would appear because anxiety is often a symptom of more all-encompassing disorders. Most people who have ADHD will have anxiety as a symptom of ADHD.
Comorbidity with
Comorbidity.
Yeah, right.
And so I think a lot of the times, like anxiety disorders purely are actually more rare than they might seem.
Okay.
But an anxiety disorder is typically characterized by if you have panic responses, if you have things like agoraphobia, don't want to leave the house, if you have things like social anxiety, they categorize it often a lot more. If it is just purely anxiety. And often, if I see people presenting with anxiety, in my experience so far, because I've been only seeing clients for a year, so in my experience so far, usually it means that there's something else going on. The anxiety presentation is not all there is.
So ADHD plus anxiety.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then depression, would that be the same? Like, when does depression, like, I'm sad, I didn't get sleep last night, so
Yeah.
I'm sad all day.
Yeah,
Or what?
yeah.
So when does depression or I'm depressed today turn into depressive disorder?
Yeah, and I mean it's a similar thing because you can feel depressive symptoms and you can have depressive moods, but then having depression is different and it's more like what characterizes a depressive disorder is being unable to pull yourself out for a time until it has run its course. So you can have somebody who maybe stays home all day and literally cannot get the motivation to leave. And then that carries on for quite a few days in a row. And that turns into a depressive disorder versus having a depressive symptom from something like ADHD. Oh, I have ADHD, and that manifests as I don't know, like a hyper awareness of things, but then also I forget other things. So now I'm depressed because I forgot all these things because my ADHD brain looked at something else and lost track of what I was doing. So now I have that symptom.
To explain ADHD for those that
Yeah.
don't know. So what is ADHD?
Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and there used to be like ADHD and ADD. ADD is not a term that we use anymore because that it's trying to differentiate the two kind of, but ADHD, even though the word hyperactive is in it, it doesn't mean that you are hyperactive. It just is how it's described, and that's usually like a frontal lobe thing where executive functioning is a little bit different, and the way that you learn, the way that you take in information is a little bit different than someone with maybe a neurotypical frontal lobe. So there's a lot of impulsivity attached to it. Sometimes there can be a lot of time blindness. There can be a lot of like
Time blindness.
Time blindness, yes.
I know people with ADHD
Yes.
that have time
Yes.
blindness.
Yes, yes.
It'll take an hour, and
Yes.
actually everyone else it takes 3. But they're,
Right.
yeah.
And that's that executive functioning part of
Right.
your brain where you it's like almost an inability to really estimate how long something's going to take.
So the difference between girls and boys, male and female,
Yeah.
women and men,
Yeah.
there is a difference of ADHD between the two.
There
It
can
seems
be,
like
yeah.
most research has been done on men
Correct. Yeah.
in a lot of cases.
Yep.
But some of this emerging research on women
Mm-hmm.
with the ADHD, it looks a little bit different sometimes.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit?
It often looks different with women, and that's why it was so underdiagnosed for a long time. Because with women, it doesn't look as much like the hyperactivity side, and with men, typically, like historically speaking, like articles based, research based, is that with men it often presents in that hyperactivity and impulsivity.
Right.
But with women, it's more about time management and that executive functioning piece.
Right.
So it looks different.
Yeah. So when that prefrontal cortex, so young, I mean, boys develop slower than girls just biologically, and some never develop their prefrontal cortices, just to be honest. But you see the prefrontal cortex just in the executive function. That's where
Yeah.
executive function comes from.
Yeah.
So we men like me, we're going to struggle with like a doubt tag where like, okay, that has a consequence to it. So I'm
Sure.
impulsive and I'm just going to do something
Yeah.
without thinking through kind of like the timeline of, oh, if I do that, then I can't do this and I won't do this. And therefore my life's a wreck.
Yeah.
Just in kind of a sequential
Yeah.
activity.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So at some point, and I can actually, what's really interesting is working with younger people and like the staff and stuff. You can
Yeah.
tell when like all of a sudden, you know, they usually quit us and go on to adult jobs when this happens.
Yeah.
As they grow up finally and
Uh-huh.
their prefrontal cortex develops.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, I need to go adult now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's really an interesting evolution and growing up, you know, that I've watched even in my
Yeah.
nieces and nephews and my own children and just watching
Yeah.
their development.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like us in the room, I would have to say probably everyone in the room is experiencing some stress of some kind, you know, through the week, through the day,
Yeah.
whatever. So there is a difference between stress, which many times is good, right? Like I need to accomplish this. I'm under
Sure.
stress.
Can be a
and
motivator.
I get my goal done.
Sure.
But then toxic stress. So
Yeah.
describe toxic stress because we're going to actually talk a lot about toxic stress. So this is going to be a little pre-work for the end of the month with Community Resilience Model with Bethany. What is toxic stress? How does that manifest itself?
Yeah.
And then what, like in your practice, like you're seeing people walk in and they're just under chronic stress.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
There's a lot of things. It manifests in physical and mental health. Chronic stress, like
Okay.
there is lots of research behind how it affects your actual physical well-being as well. It just can really degrade your like immune system, like all of these things. So they're very connected.
Right.
I've noticed that, and burnout is something that I see with, I would say like 90% of my clients, and it's not always from a job. It's sometimes from societal expectations, the stresses of if I'm not achieving, then I'm not doing enough. And I think that like this chronic stress has just increased and increased because of this access we have to information. We're constantly comparing.
Right.
We're saying if I'm not doing as much as this person that I just saw on social media, then I am failing. And that's the internal thought. And I've noticed like my younger clients, the ones who are maybe like late teens, early 20s, those are the ones that have more burnout than my clients that are maybe in their 50s because
Interesting.
they have more access to what they could be doing. And one of my clients always talks about like having like this paralysis of there's all these things I could be doing and I'm only one person and I feel like I need to do them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're seeing all the stimulus out here.
Yeah.
And they have to do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a digital native. I mean, I think the first time I looked at something called the internet,
Yeah.
right?
Dial up.
Back in the day. Was I was an adult, I was in latter college and I sat down at this computer and, you know, of course, dial up had a, you know, noise and then it just bar at a time slowly loaded a page. And I'm like, And I got off of it because I thought this was just so boring.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So for a long time, the emergence of technology, it took me a long time, but I can see now, like with my own doom scrolling at night, just looking at just garbage.
Right.
Like I'm just taking in so much information, but yet I think a difference between me and a digital native is I lived without it.
Yeah.
And I remember a time without it.
Right.
And so I know a life without it. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
that I'm living my life without it now.
Sure.
I just have a reference point.
Right.
And so I can go back to that and say, well, life could be different. I don't know if that does anything for my stress or adds to it. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But at least I have a reference. A digital native doesn't even have a reference.
Right.
Of what
Right.
life is like without a game or stimulus or
Yeah.
social media or technology. There is those of you who are concerned about young people on phones, there's a phone that I really do promote. It's called the Bark phone. And if you know anybody that the child is a certain age and the parent wants to put a phone in their hand, I always promote the Bark phone because you can start out with, okay, we have a watch that mom and dad can text, and that's all they can do is text mom and dad back and forth. So there's like a gradual increase of technology.
You also can't not give them something.
Right.
Because of the
Right.
world that we live in now, you have
Correct.
to in
Right.
order to even know where they're at.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, no one knew where I was at when I was
Sure.
a kid.
Sure.
It's like, where's Butch? Well, he's coming in at, like 10 o'clock at night, strolling in from the streets.
Oh man, your poor parents.
Yeah, totally. It was my grandparents. They just didn't know. And I think about that and I go, what did they think? Do you ever think about what your parents thought and your grandparents thought about you just traipsing off, doing your own thing and, walking in at 9:30 at night, from being out in the woods all day and doing your thing? It's like, what did they think about it?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things because there's a aversion to therapy that people are afraid of it.
Yeah.
They're afraid to go see you.
Yeah.
Right. I think therapy and classes that we take, group therapy, counseling. I just went through a trauma resilience program that we just talked openly about all of our traumas, and I just got done with that, and I'm like, okay, I'm actually healthier because of that 15 hours I spent in that intensive. What do you see people are afraid of when they go seek a counselor?
Well, that's kind of ties back to what we were talking about with these expectations people will place on themselves from seeing other people. There's a lot of, if I go to therapy, then I need to be better afterward. I need to go to each session and I need to learn something and I need to change and I need to do all these things, but therapy takes time. And I've started to see some really, really good changes in the folks that I see, but those are mainly the folks I've been seeing for a year now. So it takes time. And I think a lot of people will put pressure on themselves because we live in such a fast-paced world to heal immediately. And scientifically, when we have neural pathways wired a certain way, it takes time to rewire those pathways. It's like we're trying to beat down a trail in the Amazon rainforest, and it's going to take a while to get the machete across so that we can actually walk that trail.
Right.
And then we have to keep walking it in order for it to actually be walkable. So these things are time consuming.
I don't have the money to
And
invest.
exactly. And time consuming is very scary for us because we live in such an immediate gratification world.
I do know that shame and fear kind of play off each other also. And being a parent, you want your kids to just be, quote, normal, and you wish that they could all just be normal. And then, we have that shame and that guilt. Is this my fault that my child is dealing with chronic stress and anxiety and these things and ADHD? And I have a family member that did not get their child help because of that shame and fear that their kid was not normal.
Yeah.
And I think we really do need to grow up out of that
Yeah.
stigma, because our kids and we and our kids need help.
Yeah.
We need guidance. We need tools.
And that's the thing too, like when it's about yourself, like admitting to yourself that something is wrong is the hardest thing. Because
Right,
then that means you have
right.
to be honest with yourself about something you maybe have been pushing down.
Right.
So it's not even that sometimes that like, oh, my loved ones aren't normal. It's like, what if I'm not normal? And like, what does that mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right, let's take our first break. We're going to do a series of questions. And so in block one here, we're going to take 6 minutes, talk amongst yourselves, and just kind of explore this topic of mental health and looking at one of the difficult realities I think that we cross is yes, I'm stressed out today, but I'm also carrying wounds. And so, wounds and stress, if you can, if you feel safe enough at your table, talk about those and what you're experiencing in the world. So, we're going to go to these questions, and Adam's going to put those on the screen for about 6 minutes. So, let's take that break now. All right, let's come back to the front, bring those thoughts to a close. Our second session here is going to be trauma informed practices, but also just learning what trauma is. And we have talked a lot about what trauma is in our other sessions. There is a big difference between trauma and you hurt my feelings. So a big difference. So, but a lot of people say you traumatized me, which you just, said something that crushed me, right, for that moment. Tell us what real trauma is. I think there's a big confusion. I mean, the words that we use kind of get thrown around.
Yeah.
And so inform us, what actually is trauma?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trauma is something that creates like a chronic life change based on the thing. So if you have something traumatic happen, your life is altered. And I think that a lot of times trauma results from two different things. Not just one. Trauma isn't just one big event that is traumatizing. Trauma can also be years of being eroded in some way.
Right.
So maybe like emotionally abused by someone for a great many years. Right. So, and maybe that emotional abuse didn't feel super strong at the beginning, but it began to erode at your self-confidence and whatever it was. And that creates trauma. So there's like we call it in therapy, we call it the big T trauma and the little T trauma.
Right.
And big T trauma is big event that happened or a death of a loved one or something that was, in one incident or one thing. And the little T is something that erodes over time and creates a trauma response.
So big T trauma, little T trauma, we've learned that in the community resilience model, part 1, we talked a little bit about like what actually is, little T trauma versus big T trauma. Yeah. We're going to get into that at the end of the month as well. I think with our nervous system, we don't activate our nervous system very well anymore, like our parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous systems. Yeah. And so we don't knead bread, we don't chop wood, we don't lift and carry, we're not carrying water on our shoulders. We're not doing activities anymore that actually stimulate our nervous systems, like even going for a walk in the forest, or going for a hike, our fun time is sitting in front of the TV, right? Type of thing. And I went to a counselor once, and in therapy, I was depressed. I had some chronic depression issues going on. And the first thing that the counselor told me is, what I want you to do starting tomorrow is wake up, take a shower, and go for a walk and smell the roses. Yeah. Thanks. Here's your 150. Thanks for that. And but what they were telling me is basically activate your nervous system. Yeah. Because we're not active in that yet. There is trauma that happens that can affect our nervous system, like you're saying. Yes.
And a big part of like that parasympathetic you're talking about is bilateral stimulation. So like walking is using both sides of your body. And when you're using both sides of your body, you're activating both sides of your brain, and that can create healing in your brain. So
right side of brain, left side of body.
Exactly.
Left side of brain, right side of body. So bilateral, I'm doing something together.
And there's lots of a lot of people do a lot of swimming, or even like reading is bilateral stimulation because you're going back and forth on the page.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I've actually never heard that before.
Yeah.
Okay, so bilateral. So swimming, reading, walking. What else is bilateral?
You could, I think like bilateral is anything that just uses both sides. So it could be like, I remember one of the supervisors I had was like, my bilateral movement is my retail therapy, because she shops. So she's like, I'm shopping both sides of the aisle. She's like, so that's my bilateral stimulation. And she's like, and my credit card doesn't like it, but I like it. So it's just anything. Use both sides.
Activity, but then switching sides too.
Right. And like that's why like if you think of EMDR therapy, it's following Yep. And EMDR therapy, doing that, because when I
Okay,
was
no,
talking about
say
the,
fine.
oh yeah, EMDR, eye movement, rapid eye movement desensitization theory. So that's something where when we have that trauma in our brains, we have had those pathways I talked about earlier interrupted by the trauma. So then if you're going like this and you're going back and forth, or you're doing a movement that's like both sides. So a lot of people for bilateral movement too will just like tap
Yeah.
like this, and that helps to rewire your brain and heal those hurt pathways, those interrupted ones.
So EMDR used to be, I don't know what it's like now, but
Yeah.
it was following a light back and forth, like a
Yeah.
red light or a pen back and forth. And you would retell a traumatic story, but then retell it differently and then retell it
yeah.
positively.
The way that, because I'm currently pursuing my certification in it, so the way that I've been, outlined for it is just going like this and then asking to focus on a part of the story.
Okay.
And then what makes that part significant, and keep talking about it.
Right.
And then it will desensitize you to the trauma, but it not desensitizing as in compartmentalizing and pushing away and forgetting about it, desensitizing like fully processing it.
So almost reframing. Is reframing different?
Yeah, I think reframing does have something to do with it. I think when I talk to clients in talk therapy, we do a lot of reframing to kind of allow themselves to have compassion for their past self that was hurt.
Right.
Because trauma often carries a lot of, it was probably my fault, or what did I do to create this?
Right.
Yeah.
So EMDR again is that movement, or making a bilateral movement and focusing on part of the story.
Yep.
Reframing that story, and then basically trying to have a different relationship with self.
Yeah. And slicing it really, really thin so that there's no part of it that you haven't worked through.
Gosh, that's really interesting. Bilateral movement. I'm really intrigued. I think I'm going to go out today and do some bilateral movement.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe some shopping, both
Yeah,
sides.
totally.
Yeah.
My credit card won't like that, but I can go to the hardware store and do some bilateral therapy.
There you go. There you go. There you
I can
go.
pick out a few new tools.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so
Yoga, that's bilateral.
okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I just have never heard it put that way.
Yeah.
But that makes total sense when you're rewiring. So terminology, neural pathways are pathways in our brain to memory capsules to like whatever event. Could
It's
be
how
positive,
habits,
yeah,
it's
it
how
could be
habits
positive.
form.
Yeah.
Yep.
So our habit that we do this certain thing has a carved neural pathway in our brain. In order to reshape that,
Yeah.
you either need to, talk it through, EMDR it through,
Yeah.
trying to rewire
Yep.
where that pathway goes.
Yeah, and a trauma will create negative pathways.
Right.
And those are then what we call like a trigger or an activator, because
Right.
something normal or mundane happens, but then your body has a traumatic like trauma response.
Yeah.
And that's because of the pathway in the
Right.
brain. Yeah.
I think we use terminology these days. Maybe it's because of social media. Maybe it's because of just language we use in community. I'm triggered, when that's a real thing. Like that's a neural pathway activation. I'm triggered. Just to say you're triggered,
Yeah.
because somebody asked you to do something.
Yeah.
My kid, I was asked to clean my room. I'm triggered.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I just was asked to clean my room.
Yeah, and that's why we've changed it to activating, because my clients will, if I say, is that like a trigger or something like that, they'll be triggered by, they'll be like, that's a terrible word, that's a 21st century word, I'm not triggered by anything.
Right.
So then we call them activators now.
So let's start to move into family systems,
Yeah.
because that's your wheelhouse.
Yep.
And in the third block, we're going to really get into it.
Mm-hmm.
But just let's touch on it, because when I hear the word family systems, I think about attachment theory.
Yeah.
I think about family systems theory.
Right.
I think about mom and dad
Yeah.
and grandparents' influences.
Yeah.
Describe what family systems is and
Yeah.
how that informs our trauma,
Yeah.
what informs our healing. Yeah.
Yeah. Internal family systems is like my chosen modality for seeing clients. And Richard Schwartz created it, and it's based on family systems theory. It's based on attachment theory. It's based on a lot of other theories. It's like client-centered theory. He created like an IFS, internal family systems thing, through using all of those different theories. And how family systems works is it identifies the fact that in our family systems, we all have different roles, and not just the roles of like parent and child, but roles of like, some people are scapegoats, some people are the butt of the joke, some people are black sheep of the family, all those terminology things that we use. Middle child, or like, yeah, whatever, parentified child, stuff like that. So like family systems are like, acknowledges that all of those different things contribute to how a person grows up and how they form their world.
Yeah.
And then internal family systems talks about how we as people have an internal system inside of us that's a family. So we have parts to us. They call them parts. And like we have maybe a 5-year-old part inside of us that was hurt by someone in the past. And so then when somebody who looks like that person comes up, then we have an activated experience. So it talks about how different, maybe like big events in our life from the past created parts within us. And when we use terminology like, a part of me feels nervous about this, but the other part of me knows it's going to be okay, that's
We're
the
differentiating parts.
Right.
So that's really interesting.
Yep.
Because I think we all think in that terminology, but we're just
Yeah.
not knowing we're thinking in
Exactly.
that
And that's why it
terminology.
works.
Yeah.
Yep.
So family systems, we can be raised in a secure system
Yep.
or an insecure system.
Yep.
And in insecure systems, that could be a chaotic system, like a disorienting type system. And usually, I mean, help me through this. It could be, divorce or violence in the home.
Yeah, it could be neglect.
Okay.
And it could be, because if we're talking about like attachment, there's like the secure, but then there's also anxious and there's avoidant.
Right.
And so your parents could be really involved and overbearing and judgmental of you, or they could be completely hands off and not attending to any of your needs. And
Yes.
both are detrimental.
My daughter tells me that I'm a lawnmower parent set at the lowest level. Thanks. I'm trimming the grass
There you go.
really tight.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah. So we have an overbearing parent,
Yeah.
and then we have just a neglectful parent. Both create insecure attachment styles,
Yes.
but avoidant. So describe avoidant attachment
Yeah.
style to me. What does that look like, and what is the result of that? Like, what do you see in that?
The good thing about attachment styles is they can change, just like we talked about, like the neuroplasticity with the
Right.
thing, they can change. But an avoidant attachment style usually manifests as someone who has a hard time creating relationships with other people. They'll typically like self-destruct often, or dip out really quickly. They are often unfamiliar with emotions and expressing emotions, and are really uncomfortable with them. I have a couple clients that I feel like are kind of in that ballpark, and it can be hard to pull things out.
Okay.
Because avoidant folks can sometimes be so good at it that then they don't know what's actually happening within themselves.
Right.
Because it wasn't safe to analyze what was happening within themselves growing up. And then the anxious attachment style is kind of like the maybe their needs weren't met. So they really, really look for connection with other people, but they don't really find the best people all the time. And this is kind of general, but sometimes they'll maybe have a relationship with somebody that isn't as kind back to them, isn't as invested, but they will still maintain that relationship and still really push for it because the connection with the person is so important, and they feel like they need it.
Is that like a little Stockholm syndrome when it comes to?
Yes, it's kind of, and it's different for everyone. It manifests differently. There's also a combo. People can have anxious and avoidant, depending on the person that they're interacting with. Sometimes if they remind them of someone from the past, they have a more avoidant approach, or vice versa.
So in group modeling or group theory,
Yeah.
and being in ministry for so long, I've dealt with just groups,
Yeah.
whether it be a small group of leadership or a small group of disassociated leadership. We get together for a conference and we're in the room, right?
Yeah.
And a subject's being talked about, and someone in the room either is talking too much, angry too much, yelling, just emotionally dysregulated.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing when I'm in an environment like that, what I'm seeing is their emotions are the most important in the room to them. Their expression, that what they need to say, what they need us to know and hear.
Yeah.
And in that, if you spend long enough in that kind of environment, then all of a sudden you're just like, well, I'm just gonna hide, right? And I'm
Right.
not gonna talk about me.
And I think that goes back to like the internal family systems, like the
Right.
parts. Like
Right.
that person had a part that was activated, and that's why they're entering into that emotional state.
Right.
And then the other person who's maybe withdrawing, they're also having a part that's activated. So a lot of times I go over what attachment styles do your parts have.
Right, so
Because
you
your
can-
parts can have different attachment styles.
Right. So then that person can be mom, dad,
Yeah.
grandpa, grandma, whoever that person is
Yeah.
in the group, whether it be a family, a group. If you spend long enough in that
Right.
group,
Yeah,
then all
take
of a
on a
sudden
role.
you're taking on this role.
Yeah.
Right. And there's emotional modeling that can happen.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of like projecting. So then you come out of that group and now you're in a different group and now you emotionally model what you know from this group.
Right.
So then you enter into this other and then you become that person. My emotions are the most important thing
Yeah.
in the room.
Yeah.
And then we model that. So kids that are raised in like violent homes, conflicted homes, I see that they come out of that and then they just transfer that onto their own families.
Yeah.
And that could be avoidant personality. That could be.
And I think
not
it
dealing with
goes
issues.
another way to like describe the attachments is to use the window of tolerance. And it's like
what
the
is that?
window of what we can handle. And oftentimes, like there's the hypoarousal side and there's the hyper arousal side.
Okay.
Hyper arousal is what you're talking about, big emotional responses, like, maybe a little bit more explosive, and I need to get myself heard. They call it protest behavior, like I need to be heard. The other side, hypoarousal, typically like avoidant attachment.
Right.
And that's like withdrawing, shutting down, numbing out your emotions because it feels unsafe to engage with them.
Right.
So you want to stay inside of your window so that you don't go out on either end. But a lot of people, if they are out on their side, will push you out of yours and vice versa. So
Interesting.
the window of tolerance is what we kind of use to, like, if I'm working with couples, it's like, okay, so what's happening on like his end that's pushing you out of your window of tolerance? And not to blame them because everybody's responsible for their own
Right.
responses.
Right.
And also, if we're activating each other constantly, then that's pushing each other out of your window, and that can create issues.
Yes. And then to actually be aware of that.
Yeah.
And what's actually happening is a mountain to climb as well.
Yeah.
Because you have this couple who's been together for a great number of years and
Yeah.
they've just treated each other this way.
Right. And so
lot.
that's their wired neural pathway.
Right.
Yeah.
And to actually have that conversation and to like get back into your window of tolerance.
Yeah.
They need to, stop pushing you out of yours. I mean, that's really hard work.
Right. And
Yeah.
you can expand that window just like you can change attachment styles, but it takes staying in the window and practicing that resilience
Right.
to expand it.
Give us a success story. Like when you're in the room, what kind of breakthroughs have you seen people make in these realms?
I would say that when we've like talked about where these things come from, and we say like they'll have the response of, I don't know why I'm reacting this way. Like it doesn't make sense to me. And it's kind of validating for us to go over either the parts or the attachment to say like, this is a response that how else were you supposed to respond?
Right.
So it's like a validation of like, this is what protected you in the moment. If you were to have a big emotional response, you were listened to. So it helped you in the moment. So you can't shame yourself for coming into that conclusion. But does it work for you now? And then they usually say no.
Right.
So that's kind of those moments where a big switch can happen of like, I see why I was doing this. I'm not going to shame myself and I'm going to decide to switch it. And I think like shame is, and I've said this to every client I've ever had, and I'll say it till I'm like blue in the face. Shame is not a motivator. Shame takes the wind out of your sails.
Right.
Guilt embarrassment, that can maybe be a motivator. Shame never helps anyone ever.
So describe shame. What is shame?
It's like a dislike of yourself and who you are as a person, whereas guilt is like, oh, I messed up, but I'm not a bad person. I just did mess this thing up.
Yeah, because there is well-placed guilt. Like
Yeah.
I stole $5. I
Yeah.
shouldn't steal $5 again.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
like that's a well-placed
Yes.
guilt.
Or like when I worked at Symposium and slept in for my opening shift. and
Peyton worked for us a while
and
back.
Jake was like, just don't do it again. And I didn't. Because I had guilt. But Jake didn't shame me and tell me I was an awful employee.
Right.
He just said, I understand it happens, but don't do it again.
So well-placed guilt versus shame. A lot of people live in an immense amount of shame. You know, they've done different things and then they just are buried in shame.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of that is the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. And like 10 minutes ago, you talked about having compassion on self and actually like figuring out how to like be nice to yourself. Like
Yeah.
unpack that for me. How can I start to do the work of being nice to self?
Yeah. It sounds simple in theory, but it is the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking to somebody who has a trauma history,
Right.
and especially a trauma history that was towards them as a person. Like if you're talking about like physical abuse, that means that their body and who they were as a person was being hurt. So how could they like that about themselves? Or if you're talking about like moments where they didn't even feel like they were in control, maybe they had a really, really controlling situation they grew up in and they weren't allowed to have autonomy.
Right.
Having compassion for yourself means unlearning the ways that you were treated your whole life for a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it comes down to a couple of phrases like, are people doing the very best that they can with what they've been given? And am I doing the very best that I can with what I've been given? Even in the mistakes I'm making,
Yeah.
to just look at myself and just, you know, had to gain some chill.
Yeah.
Saying,
Yeah.
no, I'm not perfect. And this is a slow, long understanding of myself. And I'm growing and I'm learning.
Yeah.
I think that people just carry a lot of shame because they're not processing and they have this like sense of performance, like should contracts.
Yeah.
I should be better than this. I should
Yep.
be, you know, more than this. I shouldn't be this way.
Yeah.
Versus just saying, okay, I am this way and this is why I am this way and
Yeah.
how can I begin to heal
Yeah.
from this way?
And
Yeah.
it's interesting you bring up should, because should is that shame word.
Right.
And all my clients know that I've outlawed should in the therapy room. So if ever they say should, then they look at me and then they correct themselves with a different word.
Right.
And doing that, we talk about the neuroplasticity, the rewiring. We've said that a couple times. Saying out loud, like, I should do this, or I would like to do this, but it was really hard for me.
Right.
That's a positive message that goes through your ears, back in your brain, and it starts rewiring your brain.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the should contract that we put ourselves under. I always say, stop shoulding all over yourself because honestly, that we are speaking something that honestly might not be able to be accomplished,
Yeah.
right? Like you might not be equipped right now to handle this or that.
Right.
And it's like, why put ourselves under a should contract when, okay, let's start exploring possibilities and learn how to do these things versus I should be here or I should be there
And
right now.
actually you're like not doing those things is based on the experiences that you had growing up. So you actually, based on your past experiences that were negative, you actually shouldn't. Because
Right,
your brain tells you like,
Right.
if I do this, I will be unsafe. So
Right.
like that you're having the smart reaction,
Right.
but the smart reaction doesn't help us right now.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, let's take our second break. We're going to go to 6 minutes with this next set of questions. We talked a lot about attachment, trauma, and then we began to move into healing. So let's have a table talk. work through these next sets of questions, and then our third block, stay tuned, is going to be about what healing looks like. So we're getting to a positive picture. So let's take that moment right now. we added a little bit because I needed to do a couple things during our session. All right, are we ready? All right, let's bring our thoughts back to the front, and we're going to talk about what healing actually looks like. And Carl Jung did some research and writing on stimulus and then the pause and the respond. And a lot of times that pause becomes very narrow, right? So we have stimulus and respond, right? And somebody brought up during the break that sometimes the idea of I'm doing the very best I can with what I've been given turns into an excuse of not healing. Well, I'm just doing the best I can with what I've been given, and then we just move forward, right? But I think that there's a symptom there that we're not living in the pause. We have this like stimulus. I did this. They did this to me. I'm acting this way. I'm activated, triggered. I'm all these things here. And then the pause. In the pause, I think we can have some self-reflection on, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be. That takes a lot of awareness. So you said it takes like basically self-awareness to enter into healing, right? Like
Yeah,
I need
and
to,
and I think like when to that thing about like we don't want to sit in the bad, like, oh, I have this excuse, so now I can sit back.
right,
There are some clients that we won't talk about that it's justified that this is a behavior that they create. There's the clients of mine that are shaming themselves. That's where we bring in this was the only way you could respond at the time. So you did good, you did a survival technique, but now we don't want to do it anymore. But some clients, if they are almost, turning it into a motivation stopper type thing, then we go about it a different way. And we ask them like, if you could wave a magic wand, what would your ideal life look like? And then what are steps that we can take to get you there?
right. I think as individuals, can I use the word grossly human? We are just grossly human, right? We are all the things. And in biology, there were three things that we talked about. And really, it has to do with our bodies are set up to eat, to have sex, and poop, right? Those are the three basic activities of the human body, right? And we're walking through life just being grossly human many times. Right. But then that's okay if I'm just an individual on earth walking around by myself. Right. Just being grossly human. Right. I don't have to pick up after myself. I don't have to eat well. I can eat junk food and I can have sex with everybody. Right. Because but then you enter into a relationship.
Yeah.
Right. So we have this now across the table and we have to figure out how my stuff doesn't affect your stuff and your
Right.
stuff doesn't affect my stuff. And so if we could just give ourselves a lot of grace and realize that we are human and everyone in here is a human being and that in our humanness we have very basic needs and wants and desires,
Yeah.
right? And we're not going to be perfect. That's not an excuse, but we're not going to be perfect.
Right.
Right. And another thought could be, I'm going to struggle again,
Yeah.
right? In my humanness, because I have these very basic needs, wants, and desires that I'm going to activate and react on and go after. And I might hurt people and I might hurt myself. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to struggle again. But you have kind of buried yourself a little bit in this work of buried. That's a terrible word. You have
Immersed?
Immersed.
There we
Thank you.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a better choice
immersed.
of
There
words.
we go. Yeah.
You've immersed yourself into internal family systems.
Yeah.
Now you've introduced that to us. So tell me, like, I'm this human being that's trying to get along with other human beings, and I'm making all these mistakes, and my mom and dad did this, and my grandparents did this,
Yeah.
and I ingested this in my 20s, and I got addicted to this in my late teens,
Yeah.
and I hurt a lot of people along the way, and I live in shame and guilt and fear, and mostly, are you going to accept me, right, with all my hurts, habits, and hangups?
Yes,
And I
yes.
present myself as a fully human being. what do I do with this internal family system? I'm all messed
Yeah.
up and I'm sitting in your office. And it's like, how do you integrate that into your counseling? What does it mean?
Yeah. I think that when I start with internal family systems, it's also important that it's a good fit, because I think sometimes with certain folks, they come in for an episodic situation. Maybe like I've had a couple of folks come in because a relationship ended or they're dealing with some grief. And in that case, internal family systems probably wouldn't help. But if they're coming in for things that are like lifelong and really intense traumas they weren't able to talk about, or whatever it was,
All that I just described.
all that you just described, internal family systems
Yeah,
works.
right.
So you're
So if
you're
I-
a good candidate,
If I had a hard time because my dad died,
right?
probably we just need to have some grief counseling.
Sure. And also, I also have the opinion that sometimes when people come in for an episodic thing, there might be more things we can uncover underneath. And so
What's that
we
word that
can
you're
deal episodic.
Episodic.
Yep.
Oh, episode.
Like
yeah.
not chronic.
Right.
So just that one episodic moment, we can process through that, and then after that, maybe we can explore if internal family systems would be helpful for them.
Okay, got it.
But what it looks like in the counseling setting is first figuring out like that language. So the parts language of a part of me feels this way, a part of me feels that way. And then we get curious and not judgmental about those parts, because those parts were formed for a reason. So often these parts are kids, because when we are kids, the way we develop is pre-language. We don't like think about what people are saying to us necessarily. We think about how we feel and what's being modeled for us. So
Okay.
often the parts have internalized messages from childhood, and often Richard Schwartz, who started this theory, refers to it as a bunch of kids on a school bus, and they're all trying to drive the school bus. But if kids are driving a school bus, it's going to crash because
Right.
you should not be driving a school bus at 5 years old. So a lot of these parts are on your school bus, and there's the concept of all of these parts are part of you, and they are good because they're a part of you. They made you who you are, and they have developed a really, really extreme protective role. And we can have protections, we can have boundaries, we can have all of those things. But when you have too extreme of a role and it's taking over, it's driving the bus, that's when things crash and burn. So it's those roles, we don't want to get rid of the parts. We don't want to totally, congeal them into another part. We just want to make their extreme roles a little bit less.
Because one can take over.
Exactly.
You're saying, like,
Because there's the concept then of the true self. So who we are at our core. Because when we say things like, I don't know why I respond to this thing in this way and it frustrates me because I'm an adult. Why would I let this thing from childhood bother me still? That makes me frustrated. And that's the true self coming through of,
Right.
I don't actually believe I'm still in danger, for example, but my body has a fight or flight response to this particular stimulus.
So a reminder could activate that part.
Yeah.
So like this reminds me of this event or chronic relationship that I had 20 years ago. That part of me fears this relationship or this activity. So
Right.
that's when you're saying part of me feels okay and part of me
Part of me
feels
doesn't.
really bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and different parts can be taking over at the same time. And in IFS, there's 3 categories of parts. There's exiles, which are typically like the really, really young parts.
Okay.
And those parts have been deemed by the other parts too emotional to surface. So they are buried down, pushed down, and they're exiled. And then there's 2 types of protector parts, and there's firefighters and managers. And firefighters are parts that come up to put out the fire. So if we were talking about earlier attachment and maybe having a big emotional response, that's probably a firefighter trying to like either diffuse or just end it or whatever.
Burn it down.
Burn it down.
Right.
Yeah, put out the fire.
Right.
And then the manager parts are things that result in more habitual responses to trauma. So if I was activated by something and reminds me of the past, and I'm just going to never do this one thing, or I'm going to always do this every time this comes up. It's like how you manage your responses to things. And that's a protector part. But sometimes protectors have bad responses because they're trying to protect but they're protecting in a way that a child would protect or a way that an older version of you would protect. So it's not effective now.
So all of these three categories would be my inner child speaking.
Yeah, often parts are kids. Sometimes I have clients that say their parts enter their teen years and maybe early 20s.
Right.
And I think that that does often happen, especially like the older we get, we form more parts. But a lot of the ones that are the strongest are younger.
So I develop either because I, experienced an event that was neurologically pathway changing,
Yeah.
or a chronic relationship, whatever that looked
Yeah.
like, abusive parent or
Yeah.
neglect or whatever.
Yeah.
So these exile parts, describe that compared to suppressive memory. Is that the same or similar?
They can sometimes be attached
Okay.
to those parts, things
Right.
like that, because we don't want to, like the exiles are pushed down by the protectors because the exiles are saying, this is too much for me. I don't want to deal with this. So I'm going to push it down. And when
Okay.
we access those parts in therapy, we cannot access them until the protector has given us permission. And that sounds kind of like woo woo high in the sky.
Yeah.
But it's real because
see that,
if
yeah.
you bypass a protector, then they're reinforced in their job. And they say, see, when you push past me, bad stuff happens. I have this exile comes up that's really emotional and that's uncomfortable. So
So the exile part, like abandonment.
it
Could
can
that
be, yeah, yeah.
It can be that, but that
Yeah.
could be a firefighter too. Like that could be
The
when I feel abandonment, the house is burning down.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it all depends on how your system interpreted it in the moment. So if your system interpreted it as I'm a bad person, I need to shut down, or if your system interpreted it as I'm never going to let this happen again and I'm going to protect myself.
What do you think of womb trauma with this? Like
Hmm.
pregnancy womb trauma, like when somebody has a huge cortisol release that they're experiencing in the event,
Yeah.
and like whether it be violence at the home and
Yeah.
and the baby's in and then that baby's born and now they have this, they have an so some
Yeah.
neurological pathways that have
Yeah.
been developed even in the womb.
That's a good question. I think that like there's this part of Richard Schwartz IFS where he talks about generational trauma and trauma passed on.
Right.
And I think that he puts it as like usually people have a part that is associated with the wounds of the people before them.
Right.
And I think that like when it comes to stuff like that, like there is a continuity with it sometimes.
Right.
Like, for example, I'm the firstborn daughter in my family. My mom is also the firstborn daughter in her family. And my grandma, my mom's mom, is also the firstborn daughter in her family. The three of us are the exact same.
Right.
The exact same. For
Characteristics,
better and
right.
worse.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's because of that, that transition from this is the expectation of the firstborn daughter and moving on, moving on, moving on.
Right.
So the stress, maybe when you're pregnant, when you're internalizing the messages you got as a kid and trying to pass that on, sometimes that can result in that almost that generational part
Yeah.
that takes place, I think.
I read a book a while ago that was called "It Didn't Start with You,"
Yeah.
and I really appreciated that because it gave me a lot of hope and a lot of forgiveness of self.
Yeah.
Because so if you look at my family line,
Yeah.
right, my great grandmother, it's obvious, not diagnosed, but the activity, like what happened,
Sure.
right? Obviously some kind of mental illness. Not, I mean, you're talking, the early 1900s. So
Sure, yeah.
it wasn't really labeled, no
Right.
therapies, nothing like that available, right?
Yep.
Plus, not living an affluent life, you didn't have access to that kind
Right.
of stuff anyway.
Right.
Then passed on to my grandmother.
Yeah.
Obviously, either environmental or biological, either one. I mean, it honestly doesn't matter
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
And so my grandmother expressing an immense amount of mental illness, right? And then passing down onto my mother an immense amount of mental illness, right? So like I've followed this in my own just genealogical like deep dive of just thinking about my history and how that's just passed on, either environmental or biological, passed on generation after generation.
Right.
And now looking at me,
Yeah.
I go, okay, now what kind of garbage is going on in me that I need to clean up,
Yeah.
either environmental or biological or both?
Yeah.
So looking at those parts, I can see, like with myself, like the exile parts probably are in me what I think about in those relationships, how those affected me
Yeah.
deeply as a child.
Yeah.
And there's some things that today I'm activated. Like
Yeah.
if you did something or said something, or a group of something happened, yeah, that would be activated. Very unsafe,
Right.
because my protector over here, or the control,
Right. Right. Right.
like
Yeah.
like lost control.
Right.
And so
Right.
I see stuff coming out of me in
Yeah.
that just generational
Yes.
line of like, okay, I literally am acting like my grandmother right now.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
And it's things that are not like, because even if it's people that you didn't even spend all that much time around and you still act the same. I know that like oftentimes I'll hear that I'm like somebody that I never even got to meet because they had passed before I was born.
Right.
And it's stuff like that where like we all have that because we all have that connection. And it's like, if we're looking at IFS, like there are parts that we are born with, and then
Right.
they shape the way that we interact with the world.
Right. I hung out with all these people, so I
That too.
they definitely had an
Yeah,
influence
yeah.
on who I am. All right, so you enter into these conversations. You're looking at somebody with, like myself, with these parts,
Yeah.
and then you begin to unpack those with them. Like,
Yeah.
how do you interact with the parts? I mean, I know that
Yeah.
kind of sounds like you're actually having conversations with parts. So what does
And,
that
and
look
you
like?
are, and it's kind of weird because you have to kind of get the clients on board at first because you have to be like, this sounds kind of weird, but humor me. Like we're gonna be talking to a past version of you, because what needs were not met as a kid, meeting those now in adulthood, either through like me like talking to them and having compassion for the parts with them, or them having compassion for their own parts. That's what creates the healing. So you do have to like talk to them. But what I've done, and this is my process for IFS, and this is kind of like my unique approach. So this is not what everybody does, but I found these like figures in the office that I was in, and they were used for sand tray for kids. And so I took those figures and I asked my clients to pick out which figures represented which parts that we had identified. And then they placed them on the floor in the ways that they felt like they were existing in their body or just in their life. And there were often like these figures that looked like warriors or something like that. And they had like all this protective gear on them.
Right.
And then the ones that were the exiles were these like little like tiny, like I remember there was one that was like this like little girl one. And just like they have them stand in front of those exiled child parts, and they describe like why they chose the figure they chose and then why they placed them where they placed them. And so then we get curious about how each individual part is feeling, but then also how they're interacting with each other. And oftentimes, if a part there's this concept called blended. And if a part is blended with your true self, it's hard to differentiate from what's a part and what's like really me. So sometimes when we have parts that either formed really strongly or maybe formed in like later life, then those parts feel attached to our true self, and we want to work to separate. So by putting out figures, we're separating those parts from who we really are.
Yeah.
And we don't have a figure that represents the client. The client is the client.
Yeah.
So they're able to look at the figures on the floor as separate, a part of them and important for who they are, but not all that they are and not in charge of their body.
Let me give a quick illustration because I'm listening to you and I'm wondering, how are you receiving this, and the people online? How are you
Yeah.
receiving this? A couple of times you said, I know this sounds kind of strange and woo-woo.
Yeah,
right?
and it's detailed. It's a detailed
detailed.
approach.
But a lot of times with mental health practices, counseling, clinical psychology, psychiatry, it sounds so different and so out there, and I'm so ill-informed, right? And it does sound, okay, what is she saying? And
Yeah.
I'm like, this sounds so foreign. But an illustration I want to give is when I go in to the doctor, right?
Yeah.
Just a medical doctor, and he or she tells me, hey, you need your tetanus shot. And I go, oh, okay. I don't really know what tetanus is besides some kind of weird bacteria that I can get in my skin and in a wound. And I don't really know what the vaccine that they're going to give me does for me biologically.
Yeah.
But I'm going to sit in a chair and someone's going to inject a needle in my arm that I don't really know what that substance is. And they're going to inject it in me, and it's supposedly going to do something for me. Right? That I don't quite understand what it's doing for me,
Right.
but I'll fully sit in that chair and accept it and shoot me with this needle.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
So I'm willing to accept that because I kind of have more of a understanding or maybe an
Yeah.
acceptance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But when you're talking, I'm going to sit in your chair or sit with you in a chair.
Yeah.
And you're going to help me process through these things
Yeah.
that I don't quite understand, that
Right.
I'm unfamiliar with, and I don't know if it's going to work. I don't
Right.
know how it's going to work. I have an aversion to it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
that's woo-woo,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So it's like,
Yes.
why is this not woo-woo, but this is woo-woo, right?
Right.
So,
Right. Right.
So sitting with you and listening to this, it just sounds a little unfamiliar, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I do understand that there's some pieces and details of this that I'm relating to as you're speaking. Where
Right,
I go, okay,
right.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So when you're processing with a client, how do you give them like hope of, well, if we walk through this program or prescription of weeks with you,
Yeah.
help me understand how they're receiving and what process are you sending them through?
Yeah, because I'm giving this like crash course on it, and when I do this with clients, it's a lot slower paced, and you're identifying first like when those parts come up, like when that parts language first comes into the room, that's when I'll usually use IFS. So it's like if they say, you know what, a part of me really freaks out when I get into like this specific car, and I don't really know why it is. I've never been in a car crash. And so then we look at that and we say, okay, well, what type of car is it? And maybe, okay, it's this whatever type of car. Did you ever know anybody who drove that type of car? Well, I mean, I think maybe like my stepdad did or something like that. Okay, let's look at that. Why? What was the relationship like with him? Oh, he was fine, but my mom wasn't. Maybe something, you know?
Right.
So you start to like get really, really into it and start to like go underneath and peel back the layers. And then you peel back the layers of one part.
So you help them visualize something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you guide them in like a visual thought about it. So, okay, so how old is this part, do you think? And they say how old they think the part is. And then, do you think this part looks like you? Do you think this part is trying to look like somebody else? Like, what do you think? And we just get curious about it. We build it up. And then often to help them keep track, I write it down in their patient portal and I send it to them so that they can keep track of if they identify a part in session. And so then we'll go with that part. We'll keep getting curious about it. They'll keep describing things that happened to them in the past. And then I'll say, is that part of the part we already talked about? Or is this a different part? Is this part a protector? Is this part in exile? How open are you to looking at this part? Is there a protector standing in front of this part that doesn't want us to talk to this part? And just slowly like working through and identifying them. And that takes a long time. I think that with one of my clients, I think we've hit most of her parts and I've been seeing her for a year.
So give us, is it appropriate that, like without names and such, give us that example. Like, what does that look like with her?
I would say that for that scenario, it was heavily related to like medical trauma. So parts were coming out with going to the doctor or something like that. So if there's something where this person had to get like a checkup, we talked about what parts we thought might be coming up. We were like, okay, so this checkup is happening. What parts of you do you feel will be present in the room? What can we tell the parts? Because we're trying to give the parts trust in our true self. So we can say, what can we tell the parts now? I'm an adult and I actually know exactly how this is going to go because I've had this happen before.
Right.
And I can actually work through this. And I actually am the one in control of my body. And you don't actually have to step in to protect because I got it. So being able to like process through that.
Reinform
Yeah.
Like a information
Yeah.
of that part.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot
Yep.
of sense.
So then when they're able to go to the hospital or wherever they're going, they can say, "Oh, that part I think was watched me handle it myself, and now they have more trust in me." So now their extreme role is lessening because they can see, because they need the proof that I can handle myself somewhere.
So in that case, it would be somebody that developed over a long period of time, maybe in childhood, a phobia for
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
medical
Yeah.
clinic office or
Yeah.
seeing a doctor or somebody in a white coat.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like entering into that is just really scary for them because of just all this trauma of just chronic illness as a child.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a specific trauma that now you're using and reinforming that childlike part
Yeah.
to help reshape and reform their relationship with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. So, what do you wish people like us would know or understand about therapy and counseling? Like, what do you want us to know about counseling?
That it takes time and that you don't have to be perfect coming out of it.
Yeah.
And that you will experience things again, like we talked about. But I always say to clients, like my goal is to put myself out of a job because I want to be able to give you the tools to just do this on your own eventually.
Yeah.
So like, I'm just going to show you how we process this. And then in the future, you'll be able to do it on your own.
So it sounds like that integrated family systems is more of a tools-based therapy.
It is. Yeah. And then it's something that like, because as we practice it, like as clients and I practice it, they will tell me in sessions, they'll do it perfectly. They'll say like, I noticed this part come up and I told that part this, and then I took a deep breath because when that part comes into my body, it comes into my chest and makes my chest tight.
Right.
So I took a deep breath, I let my chest loosen, and now that part isn't in my body anymore. I'm not embodying that part. And they'll walk through how they were able to pull away from those extreme roles. And then that will eventually lead to those parts getting rid of those extreme roles completely and still being there because it's who you are, it's how you came about, but not taking over anymore.
So my abandonment, mother abandoned me, young age. So that's a part, like that's within a part, a childlike part.
Yeah.
So when I experience, I can just name it, right? That abandonment comes
Yeah.
out of me in
Yeah.
multiple things.
Yeah.
So I'm very transparent with people about it. You know, my birthday is a big deal
Yeah.
in my brain, right? I have
Yeah.
to sit there and like think through birthday. It's like, why is my birthday such a big deal? I'm 53, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So could 54 be different? Christmas, holidays. Like I used to go through Christmas and holidays of all kinds, you know, without a Christmas present, without
Yeah.
a birthday present, without a card, without nothing, no communication with my mom
Yeah.
for years, from like a young age of like 8 and 9 all the way through high school. So I grew up just alone and lonely and feeling like abandoned,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I wasn't totally abandoned. I had grandparents. I had dad was around. I had people.
Yeah.
But that person created that part
Yeah.
or that
And
trauma
your-
within that part.
Yeah. Your hurt
Right. My
created a
hurt.
part. Yeah.
So in integrated family systems would then teach me how to inform that part differently.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when birthday comes about now, which I've done a lot of processing and thinking and counseling and therapy and medication and all in my life
Yeah.
to, overcome certain things or to process through things.
Yeah.
This family systems would then teach me just a tool to then just communicate, reshape,
Yeah.
rethink
Right.
that.
Yeah. Because these parts they formed in childhood and they don't know that you are an adult now. They
Correct.
don't
Right.
know that you can handle yourself now.
Oh, yeah.
They think that that's their job and they're stuck in that time period.
Yeah.
And for them it happened very recently. And so they want to keep protecting and protecting and protecting and they don't know that you're an adult now.
Right.
So you can talk to them and say, "Hey, I've actually come up with tools now. I can actually do this now.
Right.
And thank you for protecting me when you did. That was very nice of you.
Right.
Now it doesn't work as well."
Yeah, it's
So-
kind of like just having this multiple personality thing going on.
Yeah,
inside
yeah,
of
yeah,
you.
yeah.
And having
Which
a
is why
conversation
this
with
does not work for people with dissociative identity disorder
yeah.
because that is an extreme version of the parts that we have. So that disorder comes about because people separated so much into the parts that they're not able to come back together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in order to enter into this conversation, like on a regular basis, I could see, some of the non-negotiables, like sleep has an effect on that conversation with
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
The relationships around me has an effect. My nutrition has an effect
Yeah.
on this. Whether I'm like just walking and getting like regular bilateral exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Something. So helping somebody through that long process of okay, let's start with the non-negotiables. That just takes time.
Yeah.
And I love what you said. I'm trying to work myself out of a job because I had a counselor once in my early or late 20s where he said, I'm going to write you a prescription. And he wrote it. He wrote a prescription.
Yeah.
And he started with like those non-negotiables with me.
Right.
And then we moved into a very specific, it wasn't this, but it was a very specific talking therapy where we're going to process through these 3 things.
Yeah.
And by the time these 3 things were over, then we're done.
Yeah.
And we can, write a new prescription, but
Sure.
we're done with this prescription. So
Right.
I really do love that. This all starts with emotional honesty, starts with transparency, vulnerability, but like you said, self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
in order to enter into this, I need to be like
Yeah.
willing to say there's something up.
Yeah, and that's what we're building is
Right.
self-awareness, because we don't like, it's so hard to be honest with ourselves when we don't like certain things or when we're hurt by things. It's hard to admit those things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's take another 6 minutes, have a table talk. We have a few more questions, and then we'll close it down at the end. All right, let's bring these thoughts to a close. Are we good? Okay. I just kind of wrote out my own little parts. So this is what I did during our break, and I'm going to read it to you. I'm just going to be an example to you here. I mentioned something, my childhood selves or my childhood parts. And between probably a cognitive age, whenever that was, to about 8 years old, I was dealing with abandonment and the fear of being left. So that was one part of me. And then because of that, I entered into a fighting, arguing type personality where I was just fighting and crying and arguing and like just that childhood, almost like reactive behavior. And that ended up probably until 12 or 13 when I entered into like more real relationships, like teen relationships. And then I began to avoid. So I became very codependent on different kind of relationships, but I avoided strong women. I avoided that completely. And I avoided basically like emotional people. So I avoided emotional people. I ended up having to process through my relationship with women because I had a certain hate for the person who like abandoned me, right? So I had to process through that. I ended up marrying a very strong personality woman, right? So I processed through that to the point where I knew what I really like kind of wanted and desired in life in a personal relationship with me. But then I had to do, and still today, had to do a lot of work through the fighting, the crying, the arguing reaction. I've had to work through that with a lot of tracking and resourcing exercises of, okay, how do I respond differently when I experience this childhood abandonment again? Like when I experience that trigger, how do I respond? How do I find the right resource internally? How do I actually like, okay, I'm actually feeling this in my body. How am I going to be different? So I get what you're saying. It's just I had to write that out in the circles and
Yeah.
say, okay, these are my parts,
Yeah, and the abandonment part you're talking about, very young, that's an exile.
right?
This part here, what was that one called?
The fighting, the arguing,
Fighting,
self,
arguing, big emotion
burning
part.
the house down.
That's that's
firefighter.
firefighter. Yep, firefighter.
Oh, I burned the house down.
Yeah. And then the other part of avoiding women, avoiding emotions,
Right.
that's a manager because it's trying to identify how to keep yourself safe from those things in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's thank Peyton for being here today. Yeah. I really appreciate who you're becoming and what you're involving yourself in and the helps that you're going to bring a lot of people in the future.
Thank you.
I'm really excited. I've known you in different realms now, and I'm really
Yeah.
excited that we entered into this realm with this talk.
This new realm is great. Not as much free coffee in this new realm.
Yeah, I know. I know.
But I do like it. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's been fun to have you here today and just to learn about this and just to get a little more informed about mental health, but also there are tools and helps and new helps that are being developed continually, that as we enter into more of a crisis over the next 5-10 years, like we're just seeing maybe awareness, like becoming aware of mental health is out there,
Yeah.
right? That there are answers and there are pathways to take forward. So I really appreciate your knowledge on this.
Of course.
Thanks everybody for being here. Have a wonderful day. Really appreciate you entering into this conversation. Yeah.